I'm Javier Espinoza, Europe Executive Editor at the Capital Forum. With me today gives me a good pleasure to be with Teresa Ribera, Executive Vice President for a clean, just, and competitive transition. Time magazine said recently that you're one of the most influential people in 2025, and of course one of the most powerful forces in Brussels. People that know you well have said that you're a leader who deeply understands how to unite people in challenging times, which we are living, that you have a sharp focus, ambition, solutions will benefit people and the planet. And you have a rare ability to broker difficult deals. But that's great because you have one of the toughest jobs in Europe to keep on track the flagship climate agenda, no small feat as we will discuss, and also to boost homegrown industries, which at times are these two things are at odds. But first of all, thank you so much for your time.
My great pleasure after such a, pressing introduction.
Excellent, great. So I want to start, and you have been in the job more or less 6 and a bit months, and I think it's a good time just to reflect on your arrival to Brussels. So even before you were born into the European Union Commission role, your pre-arrival at the European Parliament started with loud applause, cheers, noise. Just to say, without going into the detail, you came here with making a lot of noise, and you were in the Parliament during the hearing that was one of the most very difficult and contentious, and with a lot of energy. And I wonder, just because I want to get a sense of who you are as a person, and you kept it very cool. When people are asking you all these difficult questions, I would have crumbled. How do you do it?
Well, of course, it is not my intention, not even, my expectation to make noise. On the contrary, I am a true believer of deals, consensus, ownership, and capacity to join efforts to achieve difficult goals. So it is not that I feel comfortable when people get so polarized on things that, of course, are difficult, are challenging, but deserve all our attention. And I think that there is so much that unite our intention, our capacity to respond together to solve problems that yes, I did not enjoy that moment, but I think that the important thing when everybody gets so hot, to keep it cool and down, and to try to reflect using not only our souls but also our mind.
And since, of course, now you're well into power, well into your flow of your role, I can see that in all the things that you're announcing and doing. And you're, of course, under a lot of political and economic pressure from huge business interests, from enormous political forces. But, I've done my homework, and I've heard that you're a very strong leader. So tell me a little bit about the few months into your job in Brussels. How is that?
I have enjoyed so much these months in Brussels. Brussels was not something unknown to me. I've been working for more than 20 years in European affairs, in international affairs. So I'm used to have different perspectives, different expectations, lots of passion around me, with people that is willing to get her best according to her own understanding of the common interest. And this is more or less what I have found here. Maybe the most impactful thing is that the shock of understanding that the world is changing so fast was quite a spread, and I think that yes, we need to take notes. The world is changing, to understand why it is changing, where the concerns of the people, normal people, average citizens, but also the business community and the next generations, maybe identifying the most compelling and difficult issues, to take into consideration how others may be moving. Reality is always a combination of the external context and the domestic context, and how to identify the best way forward, so to stick to the principles and values, not to have the impression that we made mistakes, and 10 years time to identify, oh my God, we made such a big mistake. And I don't feel proud because of what I did. No, on the contrary, I think that we need to feel proud. It is always better to identify how to put all your energy or your flesh to solve the problems than to renounce to your principles and values. And what I have found is lots of people willing to react in this very same manner. Mm-hmm. So to try to stand up and say, okay, there are challenges, but do not feel that you are small and that you cannot do nothing. There are many things that we can do, and to provide hope. So how to solve the challenges without renouncing to what it matters. And it happens in the business community, in the expectation to deepen into the single market, in the expectation to boost opportunities, to modernize the European industry, to create jobs, to transition to a new, different way to produce and consume, and at the very same time to play the very important role of being the watchdog, if we can say it this way, to be sure that we work for the people and we work for the capacity to innovate, to improve, that consumers can count on reliable information and fair prices to be paid.
Very interesting. And you have a super privileged position and an incredible advantage point, because you are tasked with these two, as I said at the beginning, these two portfolios are enormous. In the past, people have had either one or the other, and now you're tasked of keeping the climate goals that you have been very passionate about, and you have talked about the sense of urgency years before taking this role, and at the same time you have this new role of, as you say, keeping competition fair. How are you balancing these two portfolios?
Well, I could say that in fact climate, energy, environmental portfolios that are being led by some of my colleagues, so I'm just trying to facilitate this work to my colleagues within the cluster, together with the rest of the colleagues in the college. Mm-hmm. And at the very same time, we realize that all these things are market drivers, are market forces, are very compelling aspects of what it means being competitive, but also very relevant aspects of what it means being fair. So the high quality of life for the Europeans, that is part of our treaty, our foundational law in Europe. This means that when thinking about competition policies, competition instruments, we of course need to be aware of where we take a role and how we can understand the substantial elements that may be taken into consideration by the business community, and try to update to be sure that we are not creating in an intended manner things that we do not like, or killing innovation in aspects that may require a different approach, or making more difficult to ensure the speedy transition in the energy system. And I think that this is being quite interesting, because I have the great privilege to combine the knowledge, the commitment, the engagement of a very sophisticated community, the competition community, with the expectations, the dreams, the reality, the physics of there where the wealth is created or it is destroyed, which is the climate context, the environment context, the energy transformation context. So I think it is quite a good thing. And in addition, the fact that feeling like I feel myself a truly proud European person, the scale matters. Europe is fantastic, it's huge. We can improve Europe, we can deepen into the union of the Europeans, and all these tools will help to do so.
And very good. And I want to talk about some of the things that you're actually doing and you've done explicitly this week. But has it been, as we talk about your transition from being a high official in Spain to now transition to the Commission, I've been listening to a lot of your interviews in the past, and you always refer to Brussels or the Commission. Now you're inside the machine. Are you frustrated by the bureaucracy or the process? Because your ambitions are very high, but I'm sure you're learning to drive a new ship.
I think that I have never felt that I could count on the luxury of being frustrated. I think that this is long-term, deep, strategic, but also existential battle. So, of course, there may be many challenges, overwhelming fears, but I think that we cannot afford staying in a corner. So, just to try to identify how we can speak the same language, so to learn where the difficulties, the concerns, the fears of the people around me could be, and how we can match those fears with proper solutions, how I can reflect also my own expectations is part of the exercise. And I think I have never been part of this house as an insider, but I have known very well the house for a very long time. So I think that this is an advantage. It is not something entirely new. On the contrary, it is something that that ensures that because of the fact that insiders also knew me and I knew the way they could be working, it has not been so complicated. The only thing I don't like very much is when we realize to what extent the compelling moment may create tensions or the temptation to stop and see, and that is never a solution. You cannot stop, wait and see, because the world will continue working. There will never be a better moment to do what we know we have to do, to deepen into the European project, to modernize the economy, to count on the people, to seize the opportunity that it exists for Europe also in terms of attracting investments and ensuring that because of our single market, because of our strengths and capacities, we can do much better, both for the Europeans, but also for the rest of the world.
And you are actually being very coherent and you're acting. And this week, you launched this initiative on boosting green investment. So tell me, what's the plan?
We think that it is part of our own priorities, and it is a strategic priorities for Europe for a very long time already. And as I said, it is a market force, it is a market driver, it is something that is quite an asset for any company in the world, and we live in an open economy. To bet on an energy system that is much more efficient, clean, affordable, predictable, so it needs to be built in a different manner. It also attires attention for the production of industrial equipment, for the services, for the management that requires new solutions, but a huge amount of upfront investment. We also know that we want to produce differently, and that those that will be long-lasting, profitable business will be those that bet on decarbonized ways to produce goods. So we need to come along with the companies to facilitate this deep decarbonization that is already a market force. But we also know to count on our own clean tech manufacturing, so not to rely in an excessive manner on suppliers that may be coming from abroad. We need to rebalance a little bit, global and local, so to ensure that it is a level playing field, it is a reliable market. We create the demand that could be appealing for developing the new solutions and retain talent and boost innovation. If this is the case, and we need to accelerate this transformation that are already taking place, but not necessarily in a fair manner, not necessarily in an inclusive manner, not necessarily relying on the same principles, or not necessarily at the right speed.
And others might be going faster.
And others may be going faster, or in a non-always fair way.
Yes.
We thought that it was important to be much more consistent with our domestic policies and our external policies. And that meant how we could ensure that we Europeans could count on a single framework if member states could like to come along with their companies to avoid 27 different regimes, to avoid distortions, to ensure that the level playing field, the territorial cohesion is still remain. So not something that could be breaking decades of investment in a single market, a well-functioning single market, or territorial cohesion being improved. And this is why we came up with a clean industrial stated framework that is trying to target three main aspects. The first of them being how we can accelerate the energy transition. The second thing would be how we can decarbonize our industry. The third thing, how we can ensure clean tech manufacturing in Europe, with some additional bonus, for instance, how we can provide some immediate short-term price relief for electricity, for the intense electricity consumers in the industrial context, and in exchange, how these companies that could be benefiting from these schemes should be bound to invest in more energy efficiency, storage and flexibility, or the rollout of renewable energy solutions.
That sounds like a space where you're actually merging both green and competitiveness, right? The two are moving together.
Yes, I think that this is what it is already happening in the outside world. So
Yeah.
I think that we need to think how we can be consistent when playing with the different tools.
Green transition, your goals, you have been very clear. The world needs to get to these objectives very fast. It's urgent. We're running out of time. I think I read a quote from you saying, it's a pity that we don't have enough time to do all the things that we need. The green transition is facing a lot of obstacles. It's facing pushbacks for delays in the targets. There are forces, including from far-right groups, to try and water down the ambitious green agenda. How you as Teresa Ribera, in the position of influence, what have you been doing?
Well, I've been working hard to fight against these things that are not only fake, but very dangerous. We know the data, we know the facts, we know the needs. We are responsible for ensuring the right answers. We are saying to the people, climate change is the most threatening challenge of our times. So we, being in public institutions, have to be sufficiently responsible to provide the answers, the capacity to respond to this challenge. So how we are going to accept people holding important public responsibilities, saying, yes, it may be very important, but this is not the moment to act. Yes, it is very important, but it requires so much upfront investment that we prefer that in the future you cope with the damages, with the harm, with the suffer, because we are not ready to invest.
So transferring the negative to the future generations.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that is just that is just accepting the harm and not betting on the opportunities of this transition. So increasing the cost, increasing the suffer, increasing the harm. And the worst thing, they mistake, they lie, the people. So I think that this is very important, but being firm on this statement and being able to explain why it matters, I think that we also need to be consistently providing solutions, creating the conditions, working together, ensuring that we can partner with many people that may stay silent because they don't know how to react to this horrible noise around them.
Uh-huh.
So to say, hey, here also we can stand up, we can provide solutions, and we will fight for you because we think that it is worth it to fight, and there are lots of things that we can do. And this is what we have been trying to do. And I would say that this is very much the core part of my mission letter, how the President von der Leyen, when asking the support of the Parliament, saying very clearly that she wanted to fight for a much more fair world in the future and to prepare the European Union to respond to our own commitments in terms of the climate action agenda. She wanted to take this as part of the modernization of the economy, the growth and industrial patterns in Europe, and of course the level playing field in competition terms. So that's what I've been trying to do.
Very good. And you mentioned lies, and companies have been accused now for years of, maybe publishing fake news around how green their agendas are, so-called greenwashing. This week in Brussels, there's been a lot of debate on this new directive, which would impose more obligations on companies, so that when they actually say that they're doing something green, it falls in line with what they are saying. And there's been some pushback, and some actually want this legislation to be withdrawn. What do you think?
Well, I think that it doesn't make sense to keep the people in the darkness. So I think that you may claim being green, or you may decide not to claim being green. But if you claim being green, people deserve reality behind, not just fake news. So yes, in the previous mandate, we came up with a Green Claims Directive that it is being negotiated in between the Parliament, the Commission, and the Council, the Coreper. And of course, there were some that wanted much more in terms of the detailed information that could be backing any type of claim, or who may be subject to such substantial credibility and not just saying something which is a proxy kind of general statement. The Commission has a mandate, and the Parliament has a mandate, and the Council may evolve in its mandate. I don't know. Mm-hmm. It's each one's responsibility. I think that citizens appreciate institutions paying attention and providing the credibility that is required when any product, any good is sold in the market, as it happened with the word healthy. What is healthy? We had this type of discussions in the past, and we also have something that backs what is healthy when anyone claims being healthy. Mm-hmm. It is a similar discussion.
And we should trust it, right, as consumers?
And we should trust it. We want to trust. We need trust. Trust is very important.
Absolutely.
So if I buy something because it's green, I pay a little bit more because it's green. I want to be sure that it is really green, not whatever. Mm-hmm. So I think that it was a demand. We came up, and I think that we need to try to find an agreement, to reach an agreement between the three institutions, and to provide the answer to the consumers.
But you're still pushing, it sounds from what you're saying, for these rules to go ahead for this.
Yes, of course. As the Commission, I think that it is quite clear that the Commission stands for its mandate with this proposal that came out and that has shaped the position of the Commission.
Very good. And I know that you really care about this from all your history. So we've gone through this conversation and we haven't yet mentioned Donald Trump. So I think that we must. Trump has blurred the lines on what is tech, what is fines, what is tariffs. He's just put everything into one category, which is if you touch our American companies, we're going to retaliate. It's a White House communique. I mean, it's black and white. It's not. There's no ambiguity when it comes to Trump, as we have learned. What is happening with the Digital Markets Act, which is this landmark piece of legislation that you have inherited and you are enforcing, and you have enforced with fines in relation to the U.S.? Are we going to see it watered down or delayed because of the pressure from the White House?
But no, I think that it is clear that sovereignty cannot be weaponized, cannot be challenged by others, and we have our own approach on how to ensure a well-functioning digital market, how we can ensure that there may be new incomers that challenge the traditional incumbents. So anyone willing to be part of this digital market in Europe needs to comply. Along the years we learned, and that was something that I have inherited, and this is so good because it is a great legacy, that it may be cheaper, more efficient and more effective to have this upfront approach on what it means complying with the conditions to ensure a well-functioning market and due protection to consumers. This was why the Digital Markets Act was born, and it was in full conversations and transparency with other geographies, including the United States, still being ruled by Donald Trump 1. And
he forgot, it seems.
Well, maybe I don't know. Maybe there are misunderstandings, mistakings. The fact is that when we see what the Department of Justice, the Federal Trade Commission, the American courts do to ensure the protection of their consumers and a well-functioning market, they do very similar things with an ex post approach. So a much more longer time to identify what may be the wrong behavior, how you ensure sufficient evidence, how you ensure the rights of defense of each player, and then whatever decision of infringement plus the eventual appeals to the court. So it takes very long, and in such a quick evolution in the digital context, it may arrive too late. So it is much more effective, efficient, and cheaper to come up with this upfront definition of the concessions to be matched. And I think that, it is working well. We are ensuring a learning curve. It's not been in place for so long, but I think that all the companies are increasingly understanding why and what, and we will do our best to ensure that this will stay. And of course, we will not compromise what it is around sovereignty and around regulation on how to work in our own market.
Very good. The German press has a report that the EU and the US might be working on a committee of experts so that it will involve tech companies and regulators, and there would be some sort of regulatory dialogue, which the DMA already has. That's part of the rules. Is that something that you're involved in, or that has legs?
I always think that dialogue is very good, but it depends on what you talk about.
Yeah.
And I think that I talk about the digital markets with my counterparts in the United States. The teams in DG competition talk with their counterparts in the United States. It is good to talk about technology. We don't talk about sovereignty.
But is there a committee happening, or?
No, not to the extent I know, and I would say that this is not part of any discussion.
Very good. Yeah, this week also Apple, a few hours ago, said that it was complying with the rules because they have to, but at the same time they're taking the EU to court because they don't like what they're having to do. And so what I'm trying to say is big tech is going down with the fight as well. No?
Well, I think that there are different aspects to be commented on that. The first of them is, yes, we need to assess what it is happening. Yesterday it was the deadline to comply with the previous resolutions. And we have been working hard with them. As I said, the most important thing is that this is a learning curve, how we can comply with the conditions being stated in the regulation. Now we have to assess this final result and how it is being announced. And of course, anyone, as in any country being ruled by the rule of law, has the right to go to any type of appeal to the court. But I think that the good message is that there's this message coming up from a big tech saying, yes, of course, we understand that we need to comply. Whether we like or we do not like, whether we think that it is fair, it is not fair, whatever, they are in the right, but they come up with this message.
We started the conversation talking about dealing with big powers, and big tech arguably is the current industry that is cornering markets and growing in a speed that we haven't seen before, AI, etc. Tell me about your relationship with these tech executives. How has it been? I guess it's a new group of executives that maybe you were not dealing with before in your previous.
Well, I would say a couple of things. First,
yeah.
To me it is important, the big, the small, the traditional and the new. I think that you never know where the breaking point may be, and that there may be bright, new branded ideas at a very small scale that may come up and may be revolutionary in terms of how we provide solutions to the people. So I think that it is always important to pay attention to everybody and to hear to listen where the concerns and the fears and the expectations may be, but also to be respectful, and that goes in the two directions. The second comment is that it is yes, quite a powerful and important sector. So to improve the quality of life, anyone in the world, to improve the way we can produce or we can consume, to facilitate access to knowledge, and so on and so on and so on. So I think it is probably one of the most important drivers to understand the realities of today and tomorrow. And yes, we need to pay attention. They are always quite energy consumers. So it is also important to think that in terms of the regulatory context, the management of the energy system, the capacity to ensure an efficient use of raw materials, an efficient use of energy, a due respect to creativity and to intellectual property rights. It is not new business for me. It is something that has been part of my previous positions. And even water, the use of water or the use of land. I think that in terms of fairness, it is quite an important aspect. How it has been the relation with the leading positions in these groups, I would say that respectful and open. So it is not that we are subject to any type of change because someone is going to scream more, to protest more. But I think that we need to pay attention to identify if there is something that can be improved or it doesn't work and we hadn't realized or whatever. So happy to pay attention to their concerns and of course happy to be able to express my own concerns and my own expectations, because this goes in the two directions.
Absolutely. How is the relationship with your counterparts in the US? I was in Edinburgh and you gave this speech after the FTC chairman came and expressed his views about the DMA. I think you said, call us. Are you more on calling, texting terms now with senior officials?
I had been with them in Washington and we had very constructive conversations. Important constructive conversations, so to identify where the misunderstandings could be, where the common grounds could be, where the difficulties and challenges could be. And I didn't understand very well why he came with such a strong negative message in public. And it is a little bit of a contradiction, because I think, as I say, that there may be problems everywhere, and in those cases the best thing to do is just to be quite clear. Hey, I have a problem, let's talk about the problem, how we can solve the problem. Instead of sending messages to each other through the media or in public events, it's always better to be how to say, humbly open and discreet in terms of the identification of problems, not to raise the bar of and the heat of the discussion, but on the contrary, to be focused on how to solve the problems. And I could say that for the time being things are working well, so to see how we can address whatever remedies that could be required for any of these big companies in a context where the new innovators that could feel that the traditional incumbents make them impossible to enter into the market, or how business cases being developed by the big ones could be retrofitting in the same direction, so amplifying, widening their share market against the possible entry of new ones. So I think that it is been, I could say, a respectful way to understand and to comment to each other.
Very good. I get a sense how you interact with your counterparts, which is very interesting, and I want to talk to you about competition policy, but I have one last question on the DMA. There's some cases in Germany with Amazon, in Spain with Apple, where member states are trying to do seemingly overlapping cases. Do you have any plans to rein them in and bring them all to Brussels? After all, the DMA has this responsibility. It's a single market regulation, in fact.
Well, that is an issue which is interesting. To what extent this capacity to activate the calling power, the referral of cases to the Commission, or to coordinate, first of all, through these informal network settings, to share views and to see how we can work better, because in certain cases we come up with a common view and a joint resolution of whatever problem through a commission decision. To what extent, instead of these commission resolutions, it may be a national case. And it is important to keep this network identifying when it is more adequate to have a single decision, and when it may be the case that the national authorities are the ones to take the decision. So I could be prudent on that, but it is important to keep this very intense dialogue and cooperation between the national authorities and the DG competition. And I could say that in general terms, it works pretty well, not only around the DMA, but in all the competition fields.
Yeah, at least these are people you can text and have a good interaction with. So I think this is potentially for a huge constituency in Brussels that I interact with a lot, the competition crowd, let's call it. We are trying still to get a sense of where is Teresa Ribera's mind on the big picture of what is to you competition policy. What does it mean? Tell me, is it about consumer protection? Is it about protecting businesses? How do you see the role of competition?
That is quite a funny thing. Well, I think that the role of competition is the adequate evolution of its very reason to be when it was born. So to ensure a well-functioning market that responds to, in full transparency, to a real sense of the real cost and does not create unfair situations, so with a great benefit both for the business community and for the consumers. What is the challenge? The challenge is that markets, business, consumers are not the very same that the markets, business, consumers not so far ago. Mm-hmm. So how we can play in our single market, how we can play in a world market, how we can ensure that maybe the complementarities when thinking of mergers, maybe tackle in a different manner. So horizontal and non-horizontal mergers taking place differently that may facilitate more efficiencies, but not at the cost of feeding a risk of monopolies or an abuse or a too much higher share of a market. Yeah. Is something that we need to assess. This is why we open public consultations to understand how we can improve this, or if there is a need to improve what it exists up to now, mm-hmm. how we can work with new players, as you say, in the digital context, how we can address this difficult balance between domestic and international in the single market and impacting the single market. So I would say that I feel committed to make my contribution to update to ensure that the evolution of the competition policy plays in the sense that it needs to be played. So consistent with this forward-looking approach, but at the very same time keeping a sound understanding of how things have been evolving in the last years and how they may evolve in the time to come.
Very good. And you mentioned mergers, and Draghi mentions defense and telecoms as two key sectors. Tell me where's your thinking on these two sectors and ideas.
Well, I have been speaking to the telecoms community already for a while. The big ones, the small ones, they have different views. It is a sector where still the domestic decisions dealing with the spectrum or dealing with technical characteristics filters.
And I'm sure they told you the one is 4 to 3.
Well, there are the bigs and there are the smalls, and there may be different views, as I said, from 4 to 3 or from national markets and transboundary markets, which is the important thing, how we can think in a transnational, beyond the national borders approach, and to what extent the use of infrastructures in the most effective and efficient manner could help both the big and the small. So yes, I think that this is probably one of the fields where we will be witnessing lots of things, and I would say that fluent conversation with the national regulators could be quite helpful, because I think that in many occasions the expectations on the Commission are great, but in fact we need to ensure that the national authorities do play its role in this context. In defense, it's something which is could be pretty new. Of course, defense equipments, military equipments have been out of the competition outlook, and now we will be increasingly witnessing a potential growth in these markets, and in certain occasions with the use of state aid, and in certain occasions it is through public procurement. In certain occasions there will be a need of consolidation between different companies, But it is also true that in many occasions we will be facing ambiguous situations. It is purely military, it is dual use, how it may be creating efficient complementarities, or to what extent there may be a risk to undermine competition for purposes that are not purely defense and military, but could be touching civil uses. So, well, I think that for the time being we try to learn, listen, and also provide our own knowledge on how this has been evolving and how it has worked up to now.
Very good. And I think I want to end this conversation that we're having today on how we started about leadership and the role of Europe, which now you embodied. Critics of recent reactions from Brussels to the US have said that perhaps Europe appears weak or it doesn't have the leadership that it requires. And I was wondering if you could comment on that and how you see the role of Europe in the future.
I think that the role of Europe is particularly important. To me, Europe is a global good. It's something that helps to build democracy and values. We are not perfect. We still need to do lots of things, but I think that it incarnates those elements that could be the dream for many people in the world. And this means being brave, being courageous, being smart, being polite, but being firm. So, yes, I think that we need to keep calm, but keep firm, and keep coherent, which is probably very difficult in certain occasions, but being coherent is very important.
Excellent. Executive Vice President, thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thanks a lot.